There is a strange rule that governs human behavior. The larger the crowd becomes, the smaller individual thinking often gets. People begin to borrow opinions instead of building them. They borrow confidence from numbers instead of evidence. They confuse popularity with truth. This is not because people are weak. It is because the human brain is designed to seek belonging. Belonging once meant survival. But here's the lesson. The person who stands alone isn't always the strongest person in the room. Yet the one who is willing to stand alone for the right reason has already defeated one of humanity's oldest fears, the fear of rejection. When everyone applauds the same idea, pay attention to the person who quietly asks a question. When everyone points in one direction, notice the individual who pauses to verify the facts. When everyone celebrates comfort, observe the one who chooses honesty. That individual may not be against the crowd. They may simply be committed to reality. Now let's redefine empathy. Many people believe empathy means agreeing with someone's feelings. It doesn't. Real empathy is understanding another person's reality, while having the courage to protect them from their blind spots. If everyone praises your mistakes but one person respectfully challenges you, who truly cares about your future? The answer isn't complicated. The person risking their own comfort to protect your growth has invested something far more valuable than approval. They've invested integrity. Here's an educational principle worth remembering. Social pressure changes behavior faster than logic. People often say what earns acceptance. Very few say what earns respect. That's why the individual standing alone deserves careful observation, not automatic admiration, observation. Because independent thinking leaves behavioral clues. They ask questions before making conclusions. They remain calm when emotions become contagious. They seek evidence before choosing sides, and they can disagree without trying to destroy another person's dignity. These are learned habits, not accidents. Another important lesson: never mistake loud agreement for genuine support. A crowd can cheer your confidence while quietly encouraging your weaknesses. A true empath may interrupt your comfort because they refuse to let you settle for less than your potential. Growth has never depended on applause. It has always depended on honest feedback. So train yourself to recognize the difference. Don't ask, "Who agrees with me?" Ask, "Who helps me see what I'm missing?" Don't ask, "Who stands beside me when I'm winning?" Ask, "Who stands for the truth when standing with me becomes unpopular?" Because loyalty without honesty is dependency. Honesty without empathy is cruelty. But empathy combined with courage creates transformation. As you move through life, don't become someone who follows the loudest voice. Become someone who observes carefully, thinks independently, and values truth over temporary acceptance. And when you find that one person willing to stand alone, not to gain attention, but to protect truth, growth, and genuine human connection, don't dismiss them because they're different. Listen carefully. Sometimes the quietest person in the crowd is carrying the loudest lesson. And sometimes the one standing alone isn't separated from everyone else. They're simply standing closer to the truth. There is a powerful difference between standing with a crowd and standing with conviction, and understanding that difference can completely change the way you judge both people and situations. Throughout history, the majority has often believed that numbers automatically prove correctness. Yet reality repeatedly demonstrates that truth is not determined by popularity. Human beings naturally seek acceptance because our brains are wired to value belonging, cooperation, and social approval. From an evolutionary perspective, being accepted by the group once increased the chances of survival, while isolation often meant danger. That instinct still exists today, even though our greatest challenges are no longer wild predators but social rejection, criticism, and the fear of being misunderstood. As a result, many people unconsciously adjust their opinions, silence their questions, or imitate the beliefs of those around them simply to avoid conflict or exclusion. This psychological tendency explains why crowds often move together without carefully examining whether the direction is actually right. The person who chooses to stand apart, however, has usually crossed an important psychological barrier. They have decided that principles matter more than applause, evidence matters more than assumptions, and integrity matters more than temporary comfort. Standing alone does not automatically make someone correct, but the willingness to remain independent despite pressure is a strong indicator that they are thinking instead of merely reacting. Such individuals are often willing to endure misunderstanding, because they recognize that agreement without honesty has little value. They understand that genuine respect is earned through consistency rather than popularity. This is especially important when considering empathy, because true empathy is frequently misunderstood as constant agreement or emotional validation. In reality, empathy is the ability to understand another person's experiences, emotions, and perspective, while still caring enough to guide them toward growth instead of simply protecting their comfort. A person who genuinely empathizes with you will not encourage every decision you make merely to preserve harmony. Instead, they will carefully evaluate what serves your long-term well-being, even if that means offering an uncomfortable truth. This requires courage because speaking honestly when everyone else remains silent carries personal risk. It may invite criticism, rejection, or isolation. Yet the individual who accepts those consequences for the sake of another person's growth demonstrates a depth of character that cannot be measured by social approval. This is why observing behavior under pressure reveals far more about a person's character than listening to their words during easy moments. Anyone can express loyalty when there is no cost attached to it. But integrity becomes visible only when honesty demands sacrifice. Crowds often reward agreement because agreement creates immediate comfort, while independent thought introduces uncertainty and challenges existing beliefs. However, progress in every field of human achievement has depended on individuals who questioned accepted ideas instead of blindly repeating them. Every meaningful improvement begins with someone willing to ask whether the current path is truly the best one. The same principle applies to personal relationships. The people who genuinely care about your development are often those who ask difficult questions, challenge harmful habits, and encourage accountability rather than offering endless reassurance. Their goal is not to diminish your confidence, but to strengthen your judgment. They recognize that temporary discomfort can prevent lasting regret. Learning to recognize these people requires emotional maturity, because honesty is not always pleasant, and wisdom rarely arrives wrapped in easy compliments. It often arrives through thoughtful correction delivered with respect and sincere concern. Developing the ability to appreciate such guidance also requires independent thinking. Instead of evaluating people by how frequently they agree with you, evaluate them by the consistency of their values, the quality of their reasoning, and the courage they display when truth becomes unpopular. Independent thinkers are not driven by the need to impress the crowd. They are guided by principles that remain stable regardless of changing opinions. They listen carefully before responding, seek evidence before forming conclusions, and remain open to changing their minds when presented with better information. These habits reflect intellectual humility rather than stubbornness. Ultimately, the greatest lesson is not to admire someone simply because they stand alone, but to understand why they are willing to do so. When independence is rooted in integrity, compassion, careful observation, and genuine concern for others, it becomes a powerful force for positive influence. The courage to remain faithful to truth, even without widespread approval, inspires others to think more deeply, act more responsibly, and value character over popularity, creating relationships built on trust, honesty, and lasting respect rather than temporary acceptance. One of the greatest misconceptions about empathy is the belief that it means agreeing with everyone, or constantly protecting people from discomfort. In reality, empathy is not measured by how often someone tells you what you want to hear, but by how consistently they seek what is genuinely best for you. There is a significant difference between comforting a person and helping them grow, because growth almost always requires confronting truths that are uncomfortable to accept. It is easy to support someone when their decisions require no challenge, but it takes emotional strength, wisdom, and genuine care to respectfully question choices that may lead to regret. This is where authentic empathy separates itself from simple approval. A person who truly understands your emotions does not become controlled by those emotions. Instead, they recognize your feelings while also considering your long-term well-being. They know that temporary disappointment is often a small price to pay for preventing lasting consequences. Human beings naturally seek validation because acceptance creates a sense of security. Yet constant validation without honest guidance can become harmful. If every mistake is praised, every poor decision is ignored, and every weakness is excused in the name of kindness, personal growth gradually disappears. Real empathy understands that protecting someone's future is more valuable than protecting their comfort in a single moment. This requires courage because challenging another person's perspective always carries the risk of misunderstanding or rejection. Many people remain silent not because they agree, but because they fear conflict or losing acceptance. Silence is often mistaken for support, when in reality it may simply be avoidance. The individual who chooses honesty despite that risk demonstrates a deeper level of care, because their priority is not personal popularity but another person's development. This kind of empathy requires careful observation rather than emotional reaction. Instead of responding impulsively, an empathetic person pays attention to patterns of behavior, recurring habits, emotional triggers, and the consequences that follow repeated choices. They understand that every decision creates future outcomes. And genuine care means helping someone recognize those outcomes before they become permanent. Their words are not designed to embarrass or control, but to encourage awareness and responsibility. They ask thoughtful questions instead of making harsh accusations, allowing the other person to reflect rather than become defensive. This approach creates learning instead of resistance, because people are far more likely to change when they discover truth for themselves rather than having it forced upon them. Authentic empathy also requires emotional discipline. It is possible to understand another person's pain without becoming consumed by it, just as it is possible to remain compassionate while still maintaining healthy boundaries. Someone who truly cares knows that rescuing people from every consequence often prevents them from developing resilience, accountability, and wisdom. Instead of removing every obstacle, they provide encouragement, perspective, and honest feedback that empowers growth. They recognize that confidence built on false reassurance eventually collapses, while confidence built on truth becomes stronger with every challenge overcome. This is why the most valuable relationships are not always the easiest ones. They are the relationships where honesty and compassion exist together in balance. Respectful correction, thoughtful encouragement, and consistent integrity create an environment where trust can flourish because people know they are valued for who they are, rather than merely being praised for what others want to hear. Over time, these relationships become foundations of strength because they are built on sincerity instead of convenience. The ability to receive this kind of empathy is equally important. It requires setting aside pride, resisting the urge to become defensive, and recognizing that constructive feedback is often a gift rather than an attack. Individuals who embrace this mindset become lifelong learners because they value truth more than ego and improvement more than immediate comfort. In the end, empathy is not about making every conversation pleasant. It is about ensuring that every interaction has the potential to leave someone wiser, stronger, and better prepared for the realities of life. Genuine empathy is therefore an act of courage, responsibility, and unwavering commitment to another person's growth, proving that the highest form of kindness is not endless agreement, but honest guidance delivered with wisdom, patience, and respect. One of the most revealing moments in understanding another person's character is observing how they behave when they are surrounded by social pressure. Anyone can appear confident, honest, or compassionate when there is no risk involved, but true character becomes visible only when a person must choose between doing what is right and doing what is popular. Human behavior is deeply influenced by the desire to belong because acceptance has always been connected to safety, identity, and emotional security. As a result, many individuals unconsciously adjust their words, attitudes, and even beliefs to match the opinions of the majority. This process often happens so naturally that they may not even realize they are changing their behavior. They begin agreeing with ideas they have never carefully examined, remain silent when they witness something wrong, or avoid asking important questions simply because everyone else seems convinced. This tendency demonstrates how powerful social influence can be, making it one of the strongest forces affecting human decision-making. However, there are individuals who respond differently under the same conditions. Instead of allowing the crowd to determine their thinking, they pause, observe, evaluate the available evidence, and make decisions based on principles rather than popularity. Their goal is not to oppose others for the sake of appearing different, but to ensure that their actions remain aligned with honesty, fairness, and reason. This distinction is extremely important because independence without purpose can become rebellion, while independence guided by integrity becomes wisdom. Observing how someone reacts when facing disagreement, criticism, or pressure reveals far more than listening to carefully prepared words. A person may speak convincingly about honesty, yet remain silent when honesty carries consequences. Another may frequently claim loyalty but abandon their values as soon as public opinion changes. These moments expose whether someone's beliefs are genuine or merely convenient. Patterns of behavior under pressure are therefore far more reliable than isolated actions during comfortable situations. Character is not measured by occasional acts but by consistent choices made across different circumstances. Individuals with strong principles usually display several recognizable habits. They ask thoughtful questions before accepting conclusions. They remain calm when emotions spread rapidly through a group, and they avoid making judgments without sufficient evidence. Instead of reacting impulsively, they seek understanding because they recognize that emotional intensity often clouds clear thinking. They are also willing to admit when they are wrong, because their identity is not built upon appearing perfect, but upon continually learning and improving. This willingness to correct themselves demonstrates confidence rather than weakness, since genuine confidence does not fear truth. Another important quality is their ability to disagree respectfully. They challenge ideas without attacking people's dignity, understanding that meaningful discussion becomes impossible when respect disappears. They recognize that disagreement is a natural part of learning, and that progress often begins with thoughtful questions rather than immediate agreement. This mindset allows them to remain open to new perspectives, while staying committed to evidence and ethical principles. Observing these behavioral patterns helps distinguish between those who are simply following the crowd and those who are thinking independently. It also teaches an important lesson about evaluating relationships. Instead of judging people by how enthusiastically they support every opinion, it is wiser to notice whether they remain consistent when circumstances become difficult. Do they continue speaking honestly when honesty becomes unpopular? Do they defend fairness when others remain silent? Do they maintain integrity even when there is no reward for doing so? These questions reveal the depth of a person's character far more accurately than charm, confidence, or persuasive language. Life continually presents situations where social approval competes with personal values, and every decision strengthens one habit or the other. Those who repeatedly choose integrity develop inner confidence because their actions remain consistent regardless of changing circumstances. Over time, they become dependable individuals whose words and actions align, earning trust not through popularity but through reliability. Learning to recognize these qualities also encourages the development of the same habits within ourselves, reminding us that lasting respect is built not by following the loudest voices, but by remaining faithful to truth, thoughtful judgment, and unwavering principles even when standing alone becomes the most difficult choice. Independent thinking is one of the most valuable abilities a person can develop, because it allows them to make decisions based on understanding, rather than simply accepting what others believe. In a world filled with constant information, opinions, and social influences, the ability to think clearly and evaluate ideas has become more important than ever. People are exposed to thousands of messages every day through conversations, media, communities, and online platforms, and many of these messages compete for attention by creating strong emotional reactions. Without independent thinking, individuals can easily accept information because it is repeated frequently, because many people believe it, or because it comes from a source they already trust. However, popularity does not always represent accuracy, and confidence does not always represent truth. Developing independent thought requires the discipline to slow down, examine information carefully, and separate facts from assumptions. It means asking meaningful questions, looking for evidence, and being willing to consider perspectives that may challenge existing beliefs. This process does not require rejecting every common opinion or always disagreeing with others. Instead, it involves creating the ability to make thoughtful decisions after personal evaluation. A person with independent thinking skills understands that wisdom is not found in automatically following the majority or automatically opposing it. Wisdom comes from having the ability to analyze situations and choose based on reason, values, and understanding. This mindset becomes especially important when dealing with social pressure, because groups can strongly influence individual behavior. People often adjust their opinions to match those around them, because acceptance feels safer than disagreement. While cooperation and shared understanding are valuable, losing the ability to think independently can lead to poor decisions and missed opportunities for improvement. Many important discoveries, positive changes, and solutions to difficult problems have emerged because someone was willing to question existing assumptions and explore new possibilities. The ability to think independently also strengthens personal relationships because it allows individuals to communicate honestly and respectfully. Instead of agreeing simply to avoid conflict, independent thinkers can express different perspectives while maintaining respect for others. They understand that disagreement does not have to create division. It can create learning when approached with curiosity and maturity. They focus on understanding the reasoning behind different viewpoints, rather than immediately labeling people as right or wrong. This approach creates deeper conversations and stronger connections, because people feel valued even when opinions differ. Another important aspect of independent thinking is emotional awareness. Strong emotions can influence judgment by encouraging quick reactions rather than careful consideration. Fear, anger, excitement, or the desire for approval can sometimes push people toward decisions they later regret. Independent thinkers recognize these emotional influences and create space between feeling and action. They allow themselves time to reflect before making important choices, understanding that thoughtful decisions usually require patience. They also accept that changing their mind when new information appears is not a sign of weakness but a sign of intellectual growth. A flexible mind is capable of improving because it values truth more than personal pride. Building independent thinking requires continuous practice. It involves reading widely, listening carefully, questioning respectfully, and reflecting on personal experiences. It also requires humility because no individual has complete knowledge, and everyone has areas where their understanding can improve. The goal is not to become someone who believes they are always correct, but someone who has the ability to search for what is correct. When people develop this ability, they become less controlled by external pressure and more guided by thoughtful judgment. They are better prepared to recognize manipulation, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and make decisions that reflect their true values. Ultimately, independent thinking is not about standing apart from others. It is about having the strength to remain authentic while still respecting different perspectives. It allows individuals to contribute meaningful ideas, build healthier relationships, and navigate life with greater clarity, confidence, and responsibility.